Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Capes and Tights podcast here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This week, we welcomed Matthew Klein and Morgan Beem of the comic book Crashing over at IDW Publishing. The two talked about their journey into comic books, the creation of the comic books, and other random comic book events and things. Matthew talked a little bit about the business side of it as he works for Penguin Random House as well. So enjoy this episode with Morgan Beem and Matthew Klein of Crashing. Welcome to the podcast. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thanks so much for having us on.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
No problem. It's sometimes funny having three people on talking because I talk generalized things and ask for one of you guys to speak. And then the other one's like, well, is the other one going to speak? But it happens. We'll get through this right here. But let's talk a little bit. I want to know about you guys, your introduction to the beginning of comic books, like how comic books became part of your life, not working in comics, but actually like reading it and taking into comics.
Matthew, you want to start that one?
Oh, sure. So it's interesting because we've done enough podcasts now when we've got that question. So I feel like we could almost tell each other's stories. We're at that point in the news cycle. So for me, I actually didn't start really reading comics until I was in college. The first comic I ever got, my uncle bought me a copy of Superman 75, the death of Superman. Bought two copies. One was to save to pay for college, which did not pay for anything at college in 2005. And then one was for me to read, but it was the very end of a story. So it was like cool big action sequences, but it didn't grab me. I didn't care about Superman. So it just was like, I never read. I think he also bought me Death of Jason Todd at one point. Again, end of a story, did not care. So like I got really familiar with the characters to like the animated series in the 90s, Batman animated series, terrible. We lost Kevin Conroy recently. But it was college. There was a girl down the hall that I had a big crush on, and she was reading the 52 weekly series. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting into graphic novels to have something to talk about with her. And that was how I started out.
That's awesome.
Didn't get the date, by the way. Never got the date, but ended up getting a career. So there you go.
Consolation prize.
Yes.
Yeah, and I started, when I was like, I don't know, 9 years old, I was like totally obsessed with Sailor Moon. It used to run, I think at like 6 a.m. on like Kids WB. And it was just like the coolest thing for tiny child me. And I figured out through a local bookstore. So originally they had done like the serialization of novels based on, do you remember that? They used to do that with like a bunch of like kids TV shows where they would just make like light novels.
Yeah.
Like based almost like on the transcript of the TV show. And so I started reading those, which I don't know, like gravitated to even better than watching the show. And then I figured out I was trying to find the next one to see if I could read ahead of essentially where the show was at. And the sales worker at this bookstore was like, oh, actually those look like, she's like, in my computer it says they're upstairs, not downstairs where I was finding them. And I went upstairs and that's where all the manga and comics was. And then I was just completely sold. So, I got into American comics definitely via manga. That was a big thing when I was younger. And then right around like high school, kind of high school, college age, I discovered like, I started reading a lot of like Aspen comics and Witchblade and that kind of, super 90s.
Yes.
Kind of 90s leftover comics. A lot of X-Men came up for me. And then, kind of through there, I discovered, kind of how awesome comics could be. I discovered a lot of like Vertigo and Dark Horse and Image, things that weren't necessarily just superhero books, which in my mind up to then was kind of all comics were.
Yeah.
That's kind of was my gateway.
I just love how you brought up, Matthew, you brought up Death of Superman, because we have this conversation a lot at my local comic book shop where I buy my comics, that people always come in like, you'd never guess what I got. And they're like, have a polybag Death of Superman comic book. And they think that somehow it's going to pay for someone's college tuition. And my buddy goes, I gave away those at Free Comic Book Day a couple of years ago. He's like, I had so many of them that he was just like, here's the free comics that I got from, the distributor. Here's a free comic that you want. And they're like, what? Really? That and X-Men #1, like one with all the variant covers. Yeah. And he just gave those away.
So to follow through on this tangent for a minute. So did you ever get the DVD of Superman Doomsday, the animated film? The reason I would suggest this, Justin, if you could track this down, maybe they have the extras on HBO Max. I got to check it out. But there is a phenomenal documentary on there about how they, with all the writers and editors, about how they created the event for killing off Superman. But they have a lot of news footage about the death that comes out, and you see these giant lines of people, and they're interviewing them, and they're like, I've never bought a comic before, but I think this is going to, be worth something one day. And it's just line after line, person after person. It's amazing to see the hysteria that there was back then. It's absolutely worth checking out for any fan of comics and who's interested in like the mindset of collectors and what the industry was like before the crash.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Track down this documentary. It's worth it.
It's just so funny because it's like, I don't know. Did people think that he wasn't going to come back? Like, let's be honest.
They thought he wasn't coming back. They had well, you got to remember, it wasn't done that often. This was because that was really one of the first big events where they did that. People weren't aware that they'd killed him 2 or 3 times in the 60s and 70s and brought him back like 2 issues later, right? He died a few times by that point, but no, it hadn't happened when comics were this like mainstream popular. There wasn't news coverage for it. It was so, and then they started killing everybody at a certain point, or and revamping all the heroes. Then Nightfall happens like a year later because of Superman and everything.
Yeah.
So
my parents were in line for my brother, because at the time, my brother's 2 years older than me. He was into comic books before I was, and so they went in line. Chris's Comics in Newburyport, Salem, New Hampshire, or somewhere around there in New Hampshire, and grabbed the book for him, and they were so excited. And to this day, they still bring up like, how much is that worth now? I'm like, Mom, I have a copy now and I didn't pay for it. And she's like, oh gosh, really? That sucks. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It happens in comic book industry. I've got thousands of comic books that most of them are worth nothing. So it happens.
No, I mean, before my day job used to be, I worked for Valiant Entertainment. I worked my way up to vice president of sales and marketing. And so the speculator market, you still make comics for. It's part of your business model for just about everybody. And we made glass covers. We made carbon fiber covers. We made, I've got them here. I'll show you if you want to get them on camera. Like we just did the craziest stuff possible, but that's how you got noticed. And the speculator market is a market you have to be aware of. And it gets stores, as much as people say they hate incentive covers, it does increase your sales short term. Yeah. And when you are a business and you have to justify the expense of a book, and you have to justify paying artists a certain amount of money, and you have to justify keeping an issue going for so long, guess what? You've got to make the book profitable somehow, and you've got to make the book buzzworthy somehow to get media attention for it, like podcasts like these.
Yes.
So guess what? Yeah, we'll make a glass cover. Absolutely. We'll make a glow in the dark metal cover. Yeah. Absolutely. If that's what it takes to get people to notice your book out of the 500 choices they have every month, then sure, let's do it. So
I mean, that's
really what it is now.
On top of the cover artist, right?
Oh God!
Seeing good comic artist or cover artists, that one's getting a little tricky now too.
Well, and also again, you also got to think of most cover artists don't move the needle on books anymore. And that's just the way it is. I mean, I love Alex Ross. Alex Ross does not move a book the way he used to because Well, because you get a new Alex Ross
Yep.
cover every month. It's
Mhm.
not special anymore in the way it used to be, right?
Yeah.
But an Alex Ross glow in the dark glass cover
Mhm.
would move the needle, right?
Yeah.
Jim Lee barely does covers anymore. That's why a Jim Lee cover will still move a book,
Move
and
the
you
needle,
can
yeah.
make it a 1 in 5,000 if it's just art on there.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's a different thing when big high name artists get oversaturated in the marketplace. They no longer drive sales in terms of variant covers like that. It's the way it works. So you need to find something gimmicky to do it. And then also some publishers can't afford an Alex Ross cover.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So they've got to come up with other means that we'll try and get it. And also sometimes publishers don't have enough of a lead time to book artists 6 months, 8 months, 10 months out for a book to get a slot in there. Like Mark Brooks, you got to book them 6 to 8 months at least for a cover. If then you can get them. So, and some publishers don't have that time built into their schedule. Our editor would, because she's Heather Antos and she's the best at what she does.
On top of it.
But a lot of smaller publishers like Mad
Yes.
Cave can't do that.
No.
Scout can't do that. Like they just don't have the bandwidth for it, and it's a different story. Sorry, we're getting into the business of comics here.
Yes, right. We did I did a book with a friend of mine, Joseph Schmalke out of Maine.
Yeah,
He's a horror
I know
comic book
Joseph.
writer. Yeah, and he released a book called 7 Years in Darkness independently himself,
Mhm.
and then he signed on with CEX, so that will be coming out in May of 2023 with CEX. But
Right on.
the local comic book shop that I go to and myself went in together and did a variant cover for the
Sure.
shop, and so we have a double metal cover, so it's metal front and metal back. I think it kills someone. I swear to God. You just like, if someone breaks into my house, that's what I'm going for, to help stab someone to get him out of my house.
Absolutely.
And those, we only ordered 25 of them, but they sold way faster than anything else. And they were like twice as expensive as the just a very regular store variant.
Yeah.
They are, but they're not reader copies, right?
Yep.
Those are not people that are reading the book. Those are not people who will buy issue 2. That is the thing. Those are all short-term sales things for the most part. Like the majority of those people who buy them are not, they're collectors.
Yep.
They're not readers for the most part. That's what it is. I see it all the time with every series you can think of. The majority of those folks are not big readers. If you do it again on issue 2, they'll buy it because they'll start collecting it as a set. But issue 1, it's purely for speculators and people who collect that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of variant covers and stuff like that, when you guys, we'll get into more about Crashing itself, but like when you guys had the variant covers for your issue 1 per se, do you guys talk about that together? Do people approach you? How does that work?
Matthew, you might know a little bit more about that than I do. I feel like, again, as Matthew mentioned, our editor on the book is Heather Antos, and she's just like the best. she's so like organized and on top of it, and also knows everybody. So at least from my end, it was like Heather just like went out. I don't know if people were coming to her. She was, I imagine, seeking out people and found like fabulous artists. And then she would just turn in essentially like concept sketches. The cover artist would be like, here's my idea, or here's a couple, and maybe we'd help pick from one, and just kind of went that way. Because I know that some of them, were just general variants. Some of them I think were store exclusives, and that one usually, the store wants to have a say in the artist, whether it's a local artist or something like that.
That's
Matthew,
awesome.
do you know a little bit more about how Heather found people, or were you finding people? I don't know. I just got the sketches and I was like, great.
Yeah, it's like
No, generally for books, it's up to the editors to go cast the variant covers. Every editor has a slightly different process of how they do it. Sometimes they simply say, hey, here's your artist. For work for hire stuff like Marvel, DC, they don't really consult talent almost ever. They pretty much will just go out and cast an artist. Obviously, if it's creator owned like Image, then the creators will give like a wish list and say, go get these people, or we'll actually be the ones to reach out and then pair it up with an artist, but that's creator owned. This is a little different because this is creator driven and IDW owned. So it's still work for hire technically. So what I recall was essentially Heather came to the whole team, Morgan and I and the others, and said, do you have a wish list of artists that you want me to reach out to? and like, or what type of, because also she was thinking of, my assumption is not just who the artists are, but also what type of artwork we were thinking, like what type of style. And then she went out and booked the actual artists themselves. And then, as Morgan said, she would send us like the concept. She would send us to get notes on. She would send us the pencils to get notes on. She would send us the colors to chime in on, which was really great. You know, she made sure that we were included at every stage of the process, but also was very clear of like, she's still the boss at a certain point, and like the final decision will lie with her. As it should. That is the editor's job, that is the editor's job of the book. It's not mine as the writer or Morgan as the interior artist. But there was, from the beginning, obviously Morgan was going to be the main cover artist. We were adamant about that. I love that. As a reader, I prefer that. You want the outside of the book to match the inside for those main cover arts. And then, you know, the variant artists are great because they can attract a slightly different customer. With a slightly different art style to pick up the book, which is really what they're designed for. And I think we have such a strong lineup of cover artists. I think everybody really brought their A game, and kudos to Heather for getting that work out of them.
I think they're great. I think all variant covers are great. I am always in my local comic book shop owner is going to listen to this podcast for sure. I'm a cover A kind of guy. I just think that I'm not as much as Brian K. Vaughan, who doesn't really believe in variant covers at all. But I think that, you know, I'm a big Scotty Young fan. I love his artwork. I have multiple Scotty Young tattoos, and there's a time and a place and as a cover for it. But if I buy a Scotty Young cover, in all likelihood, I'm buying cover A as well, because I think that the Scotty Young one's my collectible and the A is the reader. And the downside is that I missed out somehow at my LCS on issue 2 of Crashing. So so in my box at the shop, I have a cover C, and I was like, no, but I wanted cover A. So he's getting me a cover A from it. But I was laughing because I'm like, he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't get you cover A.
I think we still have like 50 copies of cover A left on issue 2. So you should be good, man. Tell them to place their order with Penguin Random House. They'll get it. You know, you're in Maine. It's a 2-day ship.
Yeah.
It's free shipping, free freight. Go and enjoy.
He's got it. Yeah, he's got it. He's on it. But so it was kind of funny. But I do agree with your the interior artist being the cover artist on the first issue makes a huge difference, because you get, like, you don't have to open the physical issue and find out what the art's going to look like. You can tell on the front cover. And I think that's part of the reason. I mean, there's multiple reasons why Crashing stood out to me. And I don't know, when I wrote my little review on the site for it, was that for some reason it didn't really like stand out to me as like the comic book I need to read this week, but it ended up being like the best comic book that was released that week. Well, which was awesome and one of my favorites of the year. And that's why I wanted to talk to you guys. The first thing, I mean, we talked prior to recording, Matthew and I, about what I do for a living, and I'm a graphic designer. Who created the logo?
That was IDW. Their production staff worked with Heather to create that logo. And Heather, again, similar to the variant covers, Heather was sending us different drafts and different concepts to analyze, and we were like, well, we like this. Could we combine this element with that element? You know, we were giving all of our notes. And then it came down to this logo, which I will be very upfront and say, I did not like this logo at first. I was not sold on this logo. It's in writing. It's in black and white in the email thread, where I was like, you know, it's okay. And now I've grown to absolutely love it. So I was dead wrong. I hope Heather listens to this and she hears me say I was dead wrong, and Morgan and her were completely right. I love being wrong. And I'm frequently wrong. And in this case, I was very wrong. So yeah.
It's our email threads, I think, are really fun, because I think the three of us are all strong opinioned people, but we play very nice, so it's worked out. But it is so funny sometimes when it's like, okay, but can it be like a little bit more like this? And somebody be like, no, it's gonna be like this, and you're like, but can it? Which is why, yeah, it's good then to have, you know, Heather as also a strong personality who can come in and be like, the discussion is done now. This is what we're going.
Well, it's just funny. As a graphic designer and as a I design beer cans for a brewery, and part of that is there's times where I've put fake fonts in things into things so that they're obviously bad, so they pick the one that I like. Yeah. So you have to make something really bad so that they pick the thing that, okay, well, out of these options, I like this the best. And I'm like, sounds good. Oh yeah. But only once or twice I've had to actually like put my foot down and be like, I will resign if you pick this. Like, this is not going to work. I cannot do this. The colors don't work. The letters are ugly. Well, and that's huge to me. I think that's one thing that's like a designer. It might be just me, but logos for a comic book are huge to me. And I think that there's a couple of comic books over the past 6-8 months that I've looked at and said, I want to read this, but it looks like, no offense to anybody who does Kickstarter, it looks like a Kickstarter cover, like someone who's trying to get this without the backing of some sort of publisher. And it just looks, I don't know, say cheesy and cheap. And something about Crashing to me just had that whole flow. And with Morgan's artwork on the cover and all that stuff, it definitely worked. So yes, you were wrong, Matthew.
Oh no. And it's one of those things, like, again, I come from the sales and marketing side of comics, and like, your logo is extremely important because it's just like every other part of the cover. It's got to catch someone's eye. You know, you don't make covers and you don't make logos for hardcores that you know are going to pick it up regardless. It's to get new eyes. It's to attract attention. It's also to sell the IP. You know, as much as we want to think people just make comics for the sake of making comics, it's just not the business anymore, right?
Yes.
So it's all part of your presentation material. It's all part of your pitch for a second series, for, you know, to take it beyond and see that work get a new life in other media too. And, you know, one of the great things about working with IDW is they are a professional company and they care about every single aspect of the book. And Heather makes sure every single aspect of the book is looking great. And Morgan and myself, like, everybody on this team gives a damn about every single aspect being the best it possibly can and how it creates the whole. And that's why I'm so spoiled by this being my first comic, because I know it can't all be like this every project.
And big shout out to IDW and our book designer, just talking about graphic design. I don't know if you have the issue there, but like the design of like the credits page and sort of like that front flap with like that Matthew's got it there. Oh my God, when we got that, I was like, this is genius. This is so good.
Yeah, because I mean, awesome. You look at Marvel, it's just like a little block of text, right, is for their recap pages. And here we have something visually engaging for readers that literally the story starts before page 1. Which is so cool and so much fun.
You've got like the like pain faces on there. That's like how you know how much does it hurt. You'll notice as the issues go on, that one gets progressively worse.
And I will say too, the big thing for me, a big thumbs up to any comic book creators who have a synopsis of the last issue at the beginning. Why some comic books? I'll point out Immortal Hulk from Marvel. For some weird reason, that was a very deep, very, very, very good series. But for some reason, at the beginning of every issue, they didn't tell you what happened in the previous issue. And it always irked me because it's a month between issues. It's a long time.
Justin, do you want to hear my big idea that would change all of comics forever, that I think comics should do? So I think, because I see this all the time, and we did signing tours for Crashing, and I see this all the time when people are picking up a comic that they've never heard of before. Instinctively, they turn the back to the back cover because they're thinking they're doing exactly what they do with a book, and they're looking for a synopsis. So what I would do is I would, for every issue, have a quick synopsis. Maybe it's the solicit text on the back cover, and then have 3/4 of the page or half page be the ad that you want there as well. But I would absolutely, from now on, put a little, like, the solicit text on the back of every single comic. So that people, because some people don't feel like they can open the book to see what's inside, they first turn to the back cover to see if there's some kind of a synopsis there to get them to do it. Every single store I sign Crashing at, every convention I've been at, that is what people who do not know this book and aren't sure what it is, they turn it over to the back first. So that would be that's my radical idea for the day.
There's more business talk. You can make it sponsored. The synopsis is sponsored by Coca-Cola or whatever it may be on the back cover, right?
Absolutely. Sponsored by Moderna. Go get
to say, because it's a medical book. You could have it sponsored by.
It's a medical book, right? Get a pharmaceutical. Get big pharma involved.
They get the money, right? But so how did you guys come up with Crashing? I mean, how did that start?
The germ of the idea happened during the height of the pandemic. I started with the germ basically watching testimonials from doctors and nurses who were just going through the trauma every single day of going into those hospitals and wards, and being burned out and traumatized and trying to cope with the fact that they were involved in a world that was completely overwhelming, where they had no idea if they could save anyone, and what was going to happen to them personally. And watching them with that struggle is what inspired Rose originally, was the idea of this everyday hero involved in a world that was so much bigger than her. In this case, it's not COVID, it's superpowers. Yes. You know, it's people with powers. But the idea of watching these true heroes who were talking about having panic attacks when they were in their car before they went into work, and then having to do a 12-hour shift and then go home and do it again, and losing people all day. Like that is where this book really started to germinate from.
That's awesome. And you got connected with Morgan. How did you get connected to the project?
Through once Matthew had it down, was ready to pitch, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he reached out to a good mutual friend of ours, which Matthew has dubbed the Manic Pixie Dream Boy, which I think is very apt, Ryan Cady, who's another fabulous comics writer. Ryan and I worked together. We did a webtoon called Wolfsbane, sort of like a Lone Wolf and Cub meets werewolves. And Ryan was the one who recommended me to Matthew. And then Matthew reached out and emailed me, and we just kind of rolled from there. We did a little pitch together for a little while. We weren't 100% sure. Heather was already connected to the project, but we weren't 100% sure where it was going to land publisher wise. And so it worked out great that, kind of just as we were finishing up the pitch, Heather became part of IDW, and it was just a great fit for the story. So
that's awesome.
When I tell you, Justin, everything was right time, right place. It's truly the way this book worked. Because Heather and I knew each other from Valiant while she was there and I was there, so we became friends. And during the pandemic, she pushed me and was like, why are you not writing comic pitches? Because I was a playwright and I was doing audio dramas at the time. But theater shut down because live events shut down. So I finally got it together. And then through the Manic Pixie Dream Boy of Ryan Cady, we brought Morgan on, did Heather and I at that point. And then, as Morgan said, Heather came on board at IDW while we were in the midst of getting these preview pages done. And then IDW was in the midst of looking to do a huge creator-driven slate of titles called the IDW Originals. And so they needed material, they were looking. And so this was one of the very first books that Heather pitched. And they said yes almost right away. So we only had to pitch to one publisher because the editor happened to get higher at the time. They happened to want creator-driven series, and there you go. So
well, and what was fabulous about that, I mean, the whole thing, obviously has been a well-oiled machine, but the turnaround time on the pitch, it was like, cool, we're gonna pitch it at IDW, and I don't know, what was it? It was like 2 weeks later. It was like,
yeah, it was so fast because
usually with pitching, right? You send a pitch in and it's a little bit like shouting into the void.
Yeah.
You send it, and then for like anywhere from like usually more like 3 months to like a couple of years, you're sort of like, are we, hello? Is this on?
Is anybody there?
Yeah, because like publishers, they get generally so many pitches, and
oh yeah,
editors are overwhelmed and things like that. But it is, I was so pleased that it was like, oh, I didn't have to, like badger somebody 6 months down the road to be like, is this happening? You can say no, it's okay.
Exactly. Well, it's better if you just say no and get it over with.
Yeah.
Well, part of that is how IDW sets up its pitch process. Yeah. In terms of my understanding is they have pretty regular pitch meetings where editors will pitch the projects that they are most passionate about. And again, because we were there at the beginning with Heather, when Heather was still sort of building her lineup, then we were able to be as part of her first wave, which really, really helped matters. And then they're very good about, out of a pitch meeting, they go yay, nay, or maybe if you could get this involved or that involved, and then bring it back at the next one in like a month or 2 weeks or however long it is. So IDW is a really, really great system for reviewing its pitches, which is super helpful in terms of getting that turnaround time.
And I'd say along with Crashing, they've had some hits. Like, I'm sorry, I got a couple of preview books that are coming out in December or January from IDW that are just really good as well. And a couple of that just recently released over the past couple of months. Like these originals or these creator driven ones are really good. And it makes me happy because, you know, as different intellectual properties move from publisher to publisher to publisher,
right,
it's nice to know that like some good creator owned stuff. And I thought about it this morning when I woke up. I was like, I love the fact that there's so many good new comics that are creator driven or creator owned, like Crashing. But I'm also mad at it because I just got into more independent stuff over the past couple of years. And so it was mostly superhero and higher life, other than Spawn and Walking Dead were like my other two go-tos. That I'm trying to also catch up on older classic amazing independent comic books that I missed out on. And I'm like, I don't have enough time in the day to read all these things. So please stop making such good comics, people. Now.
Slow it down.
Slow it down a little bit. And it doesn't help with getting advanced copies now to get some promotion out for you guys, that I basically feel obligated to read some of these new things. But I also taught myself that if I don't like something, I'm not going to read it anymore. Like it's like, you know, if you get halfway through it and either the art's not clicking, you know, lettering is not clicking, the story's not clicking, then you can stop. If it's not something you really want to read, then you don't have to read. And that's one of those things. There's such a good amount of good projects out there that you'll find something you like. And I was glad with Crashing that I did like it, because, you know, it made me want more. And I hate myself for being a comic book fan because the monthly thing sucks. I want to just read it all now. But
that's actually, we're starting to see that more in the marketplace because there are so many options. A lot of stores will buy really high on issue 1. Yeah. And then by issue 3, they're barely buying the book at all, but they're buying it in trade paperback.
Yes.
Like they're buying the collection. That's where they're actually making their sales. And because a lot of readers, similar to you, Justin, they're getting overwhelmed. One, it's very expensive to do that on a week by week basis. It's way more expensive than it's ever been. So a lot of, especially for miniseries like Crashing, that's brand new IP, and it's only 5 or 6 issues or 4 issues, they'll buy number 1, they're like, oh, I like this. And then when the trade comes out, they jump back into it and they can read the whole thing. But also reading habits are changing because consumption habits are changing. We are a binge culture. And people want the deal. Also, they like the deal that binge culture is. And so trade paperbacks, that's the deal. That's what you get. All your content at once. It's one of the reasons manga is still so popular. You get a giant 200-page book, unlike a 112-page image graphic novel. That's 4 issues. You actually get a whole giant, that's 80 pages of story. You get, 192 to 202 pages of manga, and it's a big giant installment. And if it's something like Blue Lock that just came out, it's coming out every 2 months. It's not bad for a release schedule.
Yes.
So that's and that's where the next generation of comics readers are manga readers right now. So that's how their brain is wired. They are wired to, it's similar to a book market, right? So that's where they are. So graphic novel sales are going up and up and up and up and up. And comic sales are staying flat and flat and flat and flat for the most part. And those retailer exclusive variants are driving a lot of those increased sales. And variants are driving a lot of sales. Yes. So it's fascinating. The whole world with comics has been changing and going towards this direction. We're seeing it now more than ever. It's awesome.
I'll always be a floppy comic book person. I just, to me, I think it's part of it's an artist thing. Like I want to see each cover. Covers are big to me and all that stuff. I think it's the, collect bagging and boarding. I think I wrote an article during a couple months ago about mental health in comic books and how it's not just reading comic books as escapism to another world that helped me, but it was the organization, it was the cataloging, it was the bagging and boarding that got my mind away from the crap we were dealing with.
It's a ritual. Totally. It's the ritual. Yeah.
But we can talk business all day long, right? But Crashing, was it? So it was obviously pitched as a mini series to start off with. Too. It wasn't ever going to be an ongoing thing. The whole idea to mix your idea of having superpower, kind of similar. One of my favorite comic book story arcs of all time is Civil War from Marvel, and so they have this Superhero Registration Act, which is, like I said, that shows parallels to the Powered Registration Act in Crashing. The visuals are amazing in it. I think there's a mixture of everything. I think your guys is the team you have built with the lettering, the boxes, the bubbles are unique and fit Morgan, fit your art style really well.
Oh
I think
yeah, Haas,
I think the merge of that
so
and how
good.
they get together is amazing.
Yeah, Haas I think is like one of the best letters, working in comics right now. He kills it, and like on this book, yeah, same thing. When I got, the PDF back that was lettered and everything, it does fit the style so well. And I know he does that in all of his books. He has an incredible range. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because yeah, it's pretty unique to the book, and I do think it fits very, very well. Yeah.
Again, as an artist, I think I see things differently than some other people who are comic book readers who may just focus on the storyline, or I read more comics than I do novels and things like that. But a lot of times now I've been looking more deep into comic books and how well the writer and the story and the script match the artwork very well. And I think this craziness of being in a hospital, and her Rose having to deal with not helping people but helping people, and so on and so forth, that the style of artwork that you have, Morgan, does fit very well with that, because there's this, I hate to say messiness to it, but there's this, I don't know, say chaos.
Gritty.
Yes.
Gritty.
And that there's
That's
this
it, it's
deeper
gritty.
thing, gritty, and the addiction part of it and all that stuff. Like, I could almost see your artwork in some sort of like addiction pamphlet of like, this is what you
I
should
hope
not
so.
do to get addicted. Because I
That's
think
my
that
dream.
like
I would love that. I would love to have like a methadone clinic,
it's
be like using or Morgan's artwork from this series, absolutely, to help people like understand what the process is.
wasn't that like Stan Lee at the very beginning? Wasn't he like writing like STD like ads?
I think so.
Paid
Yeah,
for
I
the
think that was
military or
like
something
one
like
of his day jobs for advertising was STDs. It was like
Yes.
it was BD.
Yeah,
I think
VD, that's what it
BD.
was. Yeah. But
Yeah.
there's always a story. And there's, hey, as long as you get paid, right?
Listen.
I mean, yeah. If you want to do it as a living, yeah, you got to get.
Yeah, that's the realest talk.
Yeah. Well, and do it and add on to that cohesiveness in the whole book is colors. Triona, is that how you say your name?
Triona Farrell.
Trina.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tree. She goes by Trina.
Farrell, the color is the same thing. It has this like not pastel, but like lighter color, but also bright color. And then the way that the colors are added to the angles. I don't want to give anything. I want people to read this comic book, so I don't like giving away too much in the comic book. But like, there's a shot where the laser vision type stuff going from the eyes, and that angle is just beautiful, and the colors in it or everything. Like I said, the whole thing is a great comic book, and that's why spoiler alert to anybody when we do our comics of the year, it's probably a chance that Crashing ends up on that list. So
just wait. Just have you read issue 3? Did you get the?
I have not
PDF?
read issue 3 yet.
Oof.
It's get ready, man.
Because I mean, this episode technically I do about a week in advance, so this episode will drop on the 23rd, and so issue 3 comes out on Wednesday, 16th. And so so that's well, happy birthday.
I know, it's the best birthday in the world ever. Like, I'm so excited for this birthday.
And then is it 5-issue series? So so is it 3 will be this 20, and then so the last issue will be in 2023, right? It will be in January.
Yeah, January.
Yeah. So, but there's one out in December as well, so you can get that all in that. And then there will be a trade for this as well. Speaking of waiting,
I think it's next June. I think the trade's coming out May or June.
Yeah, right around there. Yeah, and I'll be getting that too. Like I said, I don't have a problem with some trades. It's just to me, and there is one thing I read. We Ride Titans trade, and there was something cool about that. There's the graphic design part of it, where the chapters, like some trades are broken up in chapters, some are just go straight through. That the chapter artwork was really cool too, that added to it. But I almost feel like trade should have a splash page in it of the artwork from the cover of the comic book that came out, if it comes out in floppies originally, because I think
a lot of them do. Like,
I think that'd be great.
I think Image does that. It's all sort of dependent book to book.
Covers in the back, like it's not necessarily like in the chapter breaks, but
yeah, I've seen it both ways. I know Marvel used to do that. DC used to have like as the chapter breaks. Like I think my Gotham Central hardcovers over there have that in there. The cover art always goes into the trade somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you. I kind of like having, because again, it sort of mimics the experience, because that cover art is supposed to do something for your reading experience.
And these covers are gripping. Like the idea, all the variant covers, it makes you like, how crazy it was that drug paraphernalia was interpreted in a comic book years ago, in a DC comic book, that seeing that on a page, and now you guys have like pills on the, on the cover of a comic book. It's just like how far we've come in the comic book industry that allows that to happen is amazing. And I don't think you would get as many people to read the comic book if you didn't got to get that idea on the front of the cover, like say this is about the medical drama, but it's also about addiction, which is really cool.
Rose's story is one of an addict, that's the thing. There are superheroes in it, but it's not a superhero book, to your part. And that's one of the reasons I love what Morgan has done with this, is it does not look like a quote unquote, big two superhero comic. No. This looks like a character drama, which it is. This is about a story of an addict who thinks she's got it under control and then is pushed to the limit where, oh my God, maybe I don't. And then what are the consequences of that choice? Yes. And her addiction is more of a driving force, I would argue, than superpowers in this thing. Because her superpower is saving people. She just does it with a scalpel, and instead of a cape, she wears a white coat and a stethoscope. Like, that is her uniform. That is her superhero uniform. So it was which is kind of funny, because I mean, how many times did you see during the pandemic that the nurses and doctors are the superheroes of the world? So it's kind of cool to see that connection in that too. Yeah, but like all heroes, they're flawed. Yes. They're fallible. Yes. They have stuff going on just like the rest of us, and Rose is no exception to that. And in her case, her addiction is to save people, and that is what fuels everything else every other choice that she makes, good or bad. And they all have consequences. So get ready for issue 3. So, I mean, quickly before we finish up here, because I want to get you guys moving along, but you, Morgan, you've obviously illustrated for other superheroes and things like that too. Do you like this more independent creator driven style more than doing a big 2 comic book?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I haven't done a ton of big 2 comics. Yes. I think my side is a little generally kind of side. And even the big book that I did for DC was Swamp Thing Twin Branches, which was like so much fun, but that was also like not really your classic. I've never really drawn somebody like in a cape in tights.
Well, Wonder Woman, you had the Wonder Woman story, right? Yeah. Even
that one, which was again so fun. Since it's Wonder Woman black and white, those stories get to be like a little bit freer. Yeah. And so we even came at it a little bit more like, okay, we want this to feel like a Greek myth. Yes. Like armor and different. I guess she did technically have a cape in that pair, but but again, it's not so much the kind of like high chrome superhero comics that you were getting other places, because again, I mean, you like you said, with the kind of grittiness and my style you see in Crashing, like that's kind of my style all around. And most people, when they see my art, are not like, yeah, superheroes. Well, superhero. Yeah, I don't see you drawing like I said. Oh, Superman, that looks exactly like Superman. Yeah, I know shit. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I crushed a Dead Man book, DC. Just
I would write a Dead Man book as well. I think if people want to bring the team of Crashing onto Dead Man, come on, DC.
That's like kind of funny too. Crashing, like Crashing Dead Man. No.
No.
I'll have it. Let's do that crossover. Come on.
But no, I really enjoy. I mean, I've enjoyed playing in other people's playgrounds in terms of IP, and then also working on kind of more creator driven books. I like new stories, and I like stories that have a lot of where you get to dive into that interpersonal melodrama more, right? Like I like to draw like people's feelings, yes. Or like body horror, or just like things that are going to just be like a little bit more, I don't know, interpersonal. And then I also I like a story to end. Mm-hmm. Which I think is also sometimes some of the hard thing about some of like the big 2 books, right? Is that you have these legacy characters, almost like Greek myths, and they're just going to continue on forever, understandably. But I like that you can build that arc, right, where you have the beginning and then the high pitched middle, and then you can kind of wrap it up. I think that's really important to like the strength of the story. So yes. I enjoy working on that kind of property more, where we can actually, maybe the ending's not even going to be for a while, but at least like it's plotted out. It will happen.
Yes. And I'm guessing you now like this a lot, Matthew, that you're going to write another comic book.
Oh, absolutely. IDW has multiple pitches from me right now. They will be my right of first refusal going forward, because it's been such an incredible experience. And look, if you like Crashing enough, if people like Crashing enough, support the book, buy the book at your local comic shop when the trade comes out. If you're trade waiting, give it a good boost. And here's hoping someday maybe it gets bought up by a giant streaming service too, because all of that is what is required to get kind of a second arc. There are plenty of more stories to tell in this one. I've actually been toying with the next one, so we'll see. But for right now, we've got a great beginning, middle, and end. It's going to absolutely devastate and then hopefully uplift, and that is the goal that we have. So at this point in the journey.
So, I mean, I highly recommend picking up Crashing. Again, issues 1 and 2 are out. 3 by the time this episode is out. So grab that at your LCS. And again, 4 and 5 will be in December and January. And trades, and there's digital options too. So like, just get reading on this, because I definitely agree with the fact that it's a good book to read and that you guys nailed it. So keep up the good work, and I'll be following you guys some more. And we'll get you back on some point in the future and talk about future projects if you guys are cool with that. Oh, look at that cat. What's the cat's name?
Oh, this is Bato. She's coming to say hi.
Yeah. But yeah, so thank you very much for guys for coming on. You guys are both on social media too. If you guys want to put out your names, you can. They'll be in the article, the post too, if you want.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at MacTheKnife1116. And then you can find me for now on Twitter at MatthewKlein316.
For now.
Mastodon coming soon.
Yeah, and I'm just at Morgan Beem pretty much wherever I have social media. So
yes. Awesome. I really appreciate it for you guys coming on, talking Crashing. Pick it up, LCS, and pick up the trade next year when it comes out. Again, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.